And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Sunday, December 8th. And starting with the sea ice, the ice has really grown and expanded southward now across the lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait into that area west of the Seward Peninsula and just north of St. Lawrence Island. And we've had some colder air in place. We're still looking at, though, rather brisk easterly flow, offshore flow from the land, but with some colder temperatures that have been there. Thing is, now we have a shot of warmer air coming up along the west side of the state. We're going to get temperatures back up around or just above freezing along the coastline of the Seward Peninsula, and we could even see readings as warm as 32 degrees as you get up here toward Point Hope and Point Lay by the time we get into Monday afternoon and early Tuesday. So definitely the system that has come up from the North Pacific, it's as of this Sunday afternoon, the low is crossing the eastern Aleutians. It's going to pull up back here toward St. Matthew. And so that's going to cause for more of an offshore flow. The ice that has formed here within Norton Sound and down along the YK deltas. We've even seen ice growth into Bristol Bay and a few pockets here along the Alaska Peninsula. But temperatures in this area are going to be rising above freezing at least early in the week. So late tonight into early Monday morning, we have a 968 low there north of the eastern Aleutians, just west. I'm trying to see here, it's kind of covering up over the Pribilofs. This feature is going to pull further north and west by Monday afternoon, be located just southwest of St. Lawrence Island, or I'm sorry, southwest of St. Matthew Island. And this push of warmer air with southeast to southerly flow overtaking the southwest coast and interior up all up along Norton Sound. You can see temperatures getting above a little above freezing there to Nome by later Monday afternoon. And then by the time we get into Tuesday, that warmer air does continue to drift northward, though somewhat modified. There's another low, though, going to take a similar track. It's going to pull back to the north and west with some energy coming up into the Gulf. So the most active weather will continue to be out here over the eastern central Bering areas of the west-southwest coast, Alaska Peninsula, and extending up into the Gulf here as we go through the early week period. Winds and waves on Monday for the Panhandle. Look, southeast winds 25 knots, 6-foot waves here down toward Ketchikan and Metlakatla. The inner channels of Stevens Passage on up toward Lynn Canal, southeast to south winds 15 knots, waves 2-3 feet. And then southeast winds south of Sitka to 25 knots. Those will increase. Easterly winds there outside of the Icy Strait and especially outside of Yakutat Bay and south of Cape Suckling, all the way up to 45-knot easterly gales with waves building upwards of 13 to 18 feet. Tuesday, we find winds inner channel south-southeast as high as 30 knots with gusts to 25 or 35 knots here within Stevens Passage. Waves could be as high as 10 feet here, plus within Dixon Entrance. Lynn Canal, south winds 20 knots, 3-foot waves. South of Sitka, southeast winds 30 knots off of Craig, 14, 15-foot waves. Easterly winds 30 knots there near Sitka, Icy Strait, and then gales of 35 to 40 knots southeast to easterly there outside of Yakutat Bay with waves of 15 to 20 feet. Now, some powerful storm force winds will be in place here on Monday as that front approaches. Easterly wind, 50-knot storm force winds with gusts to 65 knots. That's low-end hurricane force. Easterly winds 40 knots within Prince William Sound, 10-foot waves there, but you can see waves here off the Kenai coast and especially outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance as high as 20 to 25 feet. Now, lower Cook Inlet, northeast to east winds as high as 40-knot easterly gales here just northeast of Kodiak Island, Kamishak Bay, and outside of Cook Inlet with waves 13 to as high as 19 feet. Tuesday, winds come down a bit, 40-knot winds here outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, 17-foot waves. Easterly winds 30 knots within Prince William Sound. And then as we go down upper to lower Cook Inlet, northeast winds 25 to 30 knots down through Anchor Point, but easterly gales 40 to 45 knots here, lower Cook Inlet, entrance of Cook Inlet. So we're talking about waves 15 to 19 feet. On Monday, across Kodiak Island, east to southeast winds 25 knots, 6-foot waves, Shelikof Strait, 18-footers as you get offshore of Kodiak Island. Winds will be southeast, south, and then southwest about 25 knots here along the Alaska Peninsula on the North Pacific side. On the Bering side, southeast winds 30 knots, Bristol Bay as you get up there north of Cold Bay, switching back southwesterly, waves 4 to 6 feet. And then on Tuesday, the second low is coming up out of the North Pacific. So in advance of that, we're looking at 35 to 40 knot gales on the south and east side of Kodiak Island off of Sand Point, and waves running 15 to 20 feet there. And then 30 knot southeast to east winds, Bristol Bay down here as we head toward Cold Bay, and then more southerly there north of Cold Bay with waves around 6 feet. Winds across the eastern Aleutians on Monday, 25 to 30 knots as we get out toward the central Aleutians, Atka, Adak, back west of there. 15 to 20 knot variable winds, and then westerly winds 20 knots, Kiska to Shemya. On Tuesday, westerly winds 30 knots across the eastern Aleutians. Westerly winds 25 knots, Atka, Adak, just to the west of there, and then southwest winds Kiska to Shemya at 20 knots. So as the low lifts, the first low lifts northwestward toward St. Matthew, we find 35 knot southeast gales Bristol Bay, 40 knot southeast gales within Kuskokwim Bay, and then 30 knot offshore flow out of Norton Sound and along the Yukon Delta with that ice in place. That's going to tend to pull the ice westward. And then with the front lifting northward, the warmer air coming up here into the southwest interior, winds southwesterly 25 knots, 8-foot waves, St. Paul, St. George. And then on Tuesday, in advance of the second low that's going to elongate and stretch across pretty much the same track, easterly gales 35 knots within Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim Bay. To the north, easterly flow continues, maybe not quite as strong as Monday, but 20 to 25 knot easterly offshore flow here, lower Yukon, all up along through Norton Sound. And then for the lower Chukchi down through the Bering Strait, north side of St. Lawrence, easterly 30 to 35 knot gales. We have ice in place. There will be shifting around with those kind of brisk winds, some pulling away potentially along the immediate shoreline. And then we find 30 to 40 knot winds here along the Arctic coast, the Beaufort Sea coastline. The strongest winds vicinity of Point Thompson, Kaktovik, where there is a winter weather advisory in effect for blowing and drifting snow with those stronger 40 knot easterly gales. And on Tuesday, those winds come down a bit along the Beaufort Sea coast. Easterly winds 25 to 30 knots as we drop down through the lower Chukchi Sea. Easterly winds 25 to 30 knots. Again, ice extensive through this region. And then along the west side of the Seward Peninsula and north side of St. Lawrence Island, we're looking at winds out of the east at 25 to 30 knots, ice in place, but where there is some open water, waves could be running 5 to 6 feet. On the north side of St. Lawrence on Tuesday, especially there just north of Gamble.